Welcome to the City Show. Pat O'Melia here, and this is a special presentation meeting with the mayor. We are live on all our streaming platforms, and the mayor who we're with today is the mayor of Jersey City, Stephen Fulop. Steve, the rest of it's yours.
Well, it's just good to be here. I'm looking forward to a good conversation with the three of you, and no topic is off conversation here. I mean, we got a lot going on in the city. Obviously, we're approaching an election, a lot governmentally, so happy to dig into any direction that you or people watching think is worthwhile.
For that matter, just let me introduce who's here. John Heinis, Hudson County View, Al Sullivan from Tapped Into, and if you don't know who I am, I'm Pat O'Melia with the Hudson Media Group. This is basically a press conference. We're going to hit Mayor Fulop with a bunch of questions, no holds barred. Let's start it. Mayor, I'll start first. Eric Adams in New York City.
Yeah.
What do you take away from his win? Now, he wasn't the leader in that election going into Election Day, but he worked his way up. What do you take away from his victory? What turned it for Eric Adams?
Well, I'm seeing him in a couple weeks, and I've had positive interaction with him up till now. He was leading in the polls going into Election Day, actually. There were questions around ranked choice voting and how that would play out, but ultimately he had a broad coalition, and I think that's what you could take away from that. I mean, he had a lot of different segments, and he created a coalition that spanned all boroughs of New York, and I think that's really the lesson there ultimately, that broad coalitions actually prevail and not targeted small little messages.
Well, I've seen the similarity, the reason I bring the question up, a similarity between the two of you. He went pro-law enforcement. He went pro-cop, building up the police force, making the streets safer, getting the cops back on the street, where other opponents were talking about defunding it or cranking the police back. That's why I bring that question.
I don't think he was pro-police, and I don't think I'm necessarily anti or pro-police. I think I don't think the world is as simple as that. I think that you have police officers that do the right thing, and you have some police officers that do the wrong thing. I mean, we've disciplined more police officers than anybody in New Jersey. We fired more police officers than anybody in New Jersey. And at the same time, when people unfairly criticize the police department, we stand by those officers. So I think he's similar in the sense that he didn't get into an ideology of just defunding the cops. But look, police officers are an important part of public safety. It's not the only part of public safety, but it's an important part of public safety. So we're going to continue that because I know that it's made a difference over the last 8 years.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Pam Johnson criticized you. She's an African-American leader in the Ward F. And she criticized you for the black-on-black violence. And yet most of the crime is down there, the violent crime.
Yeah.
She's also criticized you for hiring more cops. What other solutions are there besides more manpower?
I mean, we're talking right now with some good social service programs around anti-violence interrupters that have been really successful models elsewhere in the country that have really shown results. And at the end of the day, look, activists are an important part of the conversation, right? And their voice is important. Sometimes it's a different voice than the legislator or an executive, but the activists are an important part of the conversation. So people are fair to criticize, and we take it for what it is. I view my comments as trying to be as direct and honest as possible, not sugarcoating something. So we're investing in social services. We have on deck some really exciting, I think, violence interrupting programs and anti-violence initiatives. We're going to invest some real resources into that, and some real community partners that we've been talking to, spending some money on, and then ultimately, still police is part of the conversation. So we're going to be doing all that, and that's where we are.
Thank you.
So I think some of the calls for defunded Jersey City came because there are some activists and a couple electeds too that felt like there was too much money going into public safety, specifically the police, and there wasn't enough money going into those social service programs you just alluded to. So, I mean, what do you think about the current makeup? I mean, every year the police department's getting approximately 129, 130 million in salaries. How does that compare to the social service programs?
Well, I mean, I think some of the characteristics that people point to in the budget circumstances was a little bit unfair, in the sense that public safety is 10 times as big as some of the other departments to start. Secondly, when you look at something like Health and Human Services, it's unfair to look at just what the dollars spend from the traditional tax budgets, because we spend millions upon millions from grant funding and partners that aren't recognized directly in the budget the same way the police initiatives are, where we don't get the same sort of grant funding that we do for Health and Human Services. So, you know, if you look at what we invest in social services, between our CDBG funding, between our HHS, between our CSBG, between some of our partnership initiatives, you know, it's a significant number. It's exponentially more than what people have said. So, look, we're going to continue to invest in social services and Health and Human Services. Prior to our administration, Health and Human Services was not a department that was really highlighted by the city by any stretch of the imagination. We've totally revamped that with Director Flanagan. She's done a terrific job. We're going to continue to invest in that. We have some meetings tomorrow regarding some additional partners on homelessness, on mental health. So, you know, I feel like we're building in a positive direction. And again, you know, activists are an important part of the conversation. Critics are an important part of the conversation. We appreciate that. But at the same time, while we digest that and take some of that information, it's not going to change entirely what we're doing, because we think by and large we're on the right path. Not perfect, but by and large.
If I could switch gears, guys.
Yeah.
So certainly there's been a lot of talk about the Pompidou over the center over the past 2 months, and you know, good on Jersey City. They got that $24 million commitment from the state. No small feat. But with that in mind, you know, I think the first question on this is there's a big discrepancy in what people believe the city is actually going to spend. I mean, I've seen, you know, some people say that it's going to be a $3 million a year commitment. Some say $6 million. Some say $12 million. You get the picture. So when it's all encompassed together, I mean, by my calculation, including the state funding, it was about $48 million, not counting bonding costs and other construction costs. So I just want to check, like, what exactly is the investment?
Where is that $48 million from?
Well, I think that would be if it was $24 million from the state, and then if it was $6 million a year until 2024 for the city, then that would be 24 and 24. So I don't know if that's right, but
No.
all right. So what do you think is the actual cost right now?
I mean, look, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to be driven by how the community wants the programming to look. So, you know, when the Pompidou opened their outpost in Brussels, as an example, which is a city similar in size. I think Jersey City is actually larger than Brussels. Okay, they started with a show defining what a masterpiece is, and at that point they moved a lot of their major works from Paris to Brussels, and they had hundreds of thousands of people visit that and create a real tourist situation in Brussels around that exhibit. That's an option. They're willing to do those sort of things on a large scale here, and that obviously has a higher cost than, let's say, highlighting some more of the local initiatives, which they also are an expert in, and working with community partners. So once we get through the programming and working with the community on that, there'll be more clarity specifically around the economics. The fact that the state was willing to put in $24 million, which was the biggest line item on any such initiative like this in the state of New Jersey, speaks to the importance of this, not just to Jersey City, but to the entire state of New Jersey. So again, you know, there's going to be critics. You know, that's the nature of where the job is that I do today. But I think that when you look at the net positives versus the net negatives of a project like this, of global significance, right? It's hard to argue that this, at the end of the day, won't be a huge positive for Jersey City local artists and beyond. And I'm excited about it. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is the exact dollar amount. I'm going to tell you that I do believe that we have it budgeted through both the extreme and the less extreme in a way that'll have a minimal impact on the taxpayers, and that I wouldn't go down this road unless I'm comfortable that taxpayers could afford it.
Okay.
Now, where are we with Lowe's?
What?
Because Lowe's,
Yeah.
where are we at this point?
got a conference call at 4:30 today. They were at Historic Preservation earlier this week. It's moving. It's a $72 million renovation. We're working with the state on some of the grant dollars around that. I feel like Friends of the Lowe's is in a good place with regards to the conversations that we're having with the Devil's Organization. It's going to be an exciting time for Journal Square when you look at the Pompidou, when you look at the buildings that the council agreed that we could acquire from the college, when you look at the Lowe's, when you look at what's on deck between some of the pathway that the Namdar is making between their multiple buildings, and it's going to have a very similar feel to the Newark Avenue pedestrian plaza. It's part of kind of the requirement for their buildings. And then, of course, you have the Kushner projects there and the Harwood project, which looks like that might get moving as well in the very near term. So it's an exciting time to be in Journal Square, and the Pompidou is an important part of that, as is the Lowe's.
Okay.
And they're both moving.
We done with Pompidou?
You can keep going on.
We're
that.
done with Pompidou.
Pompidou,
Yeah.
that's kind of like jewelry for Jersey City. It's not something we need, but it's something you would like to see Jersey City have.
Let me say this. No, I disagree on that, okay? We are a city that aspires to be the best mid-sized city in the country. That means that we need to reach big, and we shouldn't be complacent with just having a neighborhood or small facility. We should be dreaming big and aspiring big for everything that we do. And we've tried to do that. And it's not only about a museum, it's about social services, it's about reimagining what the housing authority could look like. It's about how we position things like Bayfront. It's about thinking big around Sci-Tech City. And so when somebody says, well, you don't really need it, I think all of these things are part of having a great city. And so to me, when you think about kind of the future of Jersey City and you want to have a global brand and a global destination and someplace that is really, really significant beyond just people talking about it as being a sixth borough, which is offensive to me, these things are important. Very, very important. And we could do multiple things at the same time, which I think we're doing.
See, I kind of liken the Pompidou to, if you recall, Mayor Healy wanted to bring the Jets to Jersey City for a training facility down on Cape and Point
Which
Road.
I think would have been great.
Again, it would have been great. It's good jewelry for the city, but it's not something we really need.
Well,
So that's how I looked at Pompidou.
You could do the basic things from a public service standpoint, police and fire and housing and social services, and at the same time do the other things that build a city. I think that over the last 8 years, the fact that we are such a growing city speaks to the success that we've had. We're more of a destination. People are aspiring to be here at a higher rate than they ever have before. The brand of the city is different than it was certainly 8 years ago. Young people view the city differently how they used to view it. The investment that's coming in here, those are all signs of a healthy city. It's not a perfect city, but it's a healthy city. Most cities in the country would dream of having these sort of things. When you think about transformational projects that we have in the city, most people would say, hey, I would hope as a city to have maybe one transformational type project. We have multiple ones. What's happening in Journal Square, as I said, Bayfront, the whole municipal complex on Ward F. You think about these things, they're really significant, and they speak to not extra things, they're all part of a healthy, growing ecosystem, which is what we have, I think.
Is that the embankment? There seems to be progress on that talk of eminent domain. Would that fit in?
We're in a tough spot on that, the embankment, because ultimately we're trying to figure out what the best route is for litigation that we're in right now, and hopefully avoiding the next steps of litigation. We had a meeting last week or the week before with the Embankment Coalition and the prospective developer, and we're going to try a couple different things, think through a couple different proposals that they brought forward, and we'll see where it goes. But I think we really need to get Conrail back at the table, and they've been reluctant up till now, and we'll see if the developer, the Albanese group, is able to get them back to the table to have a productive conversation. We haven't been able to do that up till now.
I thought it would end with the death of the owner.
We were on the goal line in December. Okay,
Right.
like when I tell you the goal line, I mean it was first and inches on the goal line.
Right.
And abruptly Conrail decided to reverse course because the Trump administration agreed to some things that Conrail, or highlighted some things that Conrail never thought that they would be entitled to. And so Conrail abruptly reversed courses. And that's been a challenge for us because they agreed in principle to certain parameters that they felt they no longer had to abide by. And so we are pushing back best we can. We've tried to leverage Congressman Payne and Congressman Series because Conrail interacts with them, and they're both sit on committees down in Trenton that are pretty significant to Conrail. That's a fortunate thing for Hudson County residents. So both congressmen have been more engaged than they have in any point in the last 20 years, but we still struggle with getting Conrail back to the table. I think once we get them back to the table, we could figure something out. But
Before we go to break, who owns the 6th Street embankment? I have a bit of history with the 6th Street embankment.
You do, I know.
An old friend of ours, Steve Hyman, and now Vicky Hyman, who, as I understand it, owns the embankment. Who owns the embankment?
I think you could say technically, I think the position that we've taken is, yes, they have the title. However, we would say that they acquired it unlawfully from Conrail, selling it improperly. And that's the crux of what we're discussing today, is that should have been going to the city first, and the city should have had that opportunity to acquire it. And there were laws that govern how Conrail needs to conduct themselves with public right-of-ways, and they didn't do it in this situation. So if somebody sells something improperly, should we just acknowledge it as that's okay, or should we fight, as we're doing, for it to be part of Jersey City's open space? That's the crux of it. So do they own it today? You could argue yes, but I would argue that they acquired it in a way that they shouldn't have been able to.
As I recall, Conrail didn't properly abandon the property.
Right, so there are laws about what abandonment means. They said that it was a spur, so they didn't need to abandon it. We said it was a line of rail, and the courts have said it's a line of rail. So that leads to the next step, which is, okay, what does that mean with regards to what was done before and how to move forward from here? And that's where we are right now.
Been going on for about 20 years, since the days of Glenn Cunningham. You're watching Meeting with the Mayor. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Burns Brothers Memorials, Monuments, and Markers, 787 Tunley Avenue, Jersey City. Hudson County's only monument maker, serving all faiths and cemeteries. Design, studio, and large inventory on site. Cemetery inscriptions and custom orders welcome. Burns Brothers Memorials, Monuments, and Markers, 787 Tunley Avenue, just south of Secaucus Road. Craftsmanship that will last for all eternity. Burns Brothers, Jersey City, Albert H. Hopper, North Arlington. Visit us on the net. Consumer Carpets, 3408 Kennedy Boulevard in the Jersey City Heights, your one-stop store for residential and commercial floor treatments, carpeting, linoleum, tiles, laminates, hardwood floors, area rugs, remnants, all major brands, all in stock. Free estimates, same-day installation. Consumer Carpets, it's savings, selection, installation. Credit cards and debit cards accepted. Financing available. Consumer Carpets, price to fit your budget, installation to fit your schedule. On the net at consumercarpets.com. Consumer Carpets, Jersey City, 201-792-2712.
A brand new truck isn't just a brand new truck when it's tough enough to have best-in-class available payload and smart enough to know that a cab can also be an office. A truck equipped with best-in-class available towing that asks, why can't all that power more than just this truck? No. Your brand new truck isn't just a brand new truck when it's the all-new F-150. Tough this smart can only be called F-150.
We're back. Meeting with the Mayor. I'm Pat O'Melia, John Heinis from Hudson County View, Al Sullivan from Tapped Into, and of course the Mayor of Jersey City, Steve Fulop. John, next.
Thank you, Pat. So, Mayor, today we talked about a lot. Obviously, we discussed Pompidou, Bayfront. We've also talked about Journal Square as a whole, the Lowe's Theater. But when you're looking back at the past 8 years, what are some things where you may have some regrets, and if not regrets, maybe something you wish you would have approached a little differently?
There's plenty of them. Okay. I mean, look, the most recent one I would say was obviously with regards to the whole Exchange Place and the Polish statue there, right? In hindsight, I still believe that we were on the right side of that argument. I thought we did a poor job in communicating and engaging the community on that. There's been a couple examples where I think that I've gotten better over time, but could do a better job in engagement. And this job, there's a lot of things happening simultaneously, and we try very hard to move quickly on things. And I think that's been a positive for the city overall. But look, we make mistakes like that, and they happen. And I would say the second thing, I would say that I've gotten better at hiring. I've gotten better at staffing, at building the team. We have the strongest team that we've ever had, and those things don't happen overnight. Like as you get into a position like this with 3,000 employees, there's a lot happening simultaneously. You have a lot of different types of employees with a lot of different types of qualifications. So it's really, really hard to figure that out initially, and I've gotten better at it, but I've made some mistakes along the way.
All right, thanks.
Can you name all 3,000 of the employees?
No.
Go ahead.
The MUA
Yes.
with the trash fee.
Yeah.
That's going to become a big topic in the campaign. It's a big topic now on social media. Can you explain to us how that came about and why it's here?
Look, we're in the political season, right? So there are a lot of things that are going to be a major topic that probably shouldn't be a major topic. When you think about kind of the municipal budget overall, our structure and fees and cost of running government goes up every single year at the beginning of the year. The same way somebody's household goes up. Cost of goods goes up, energy cost goes up, contracts with unions and salaries go up. So we go into the year every year with trying to figure out tens of millions of dollars in added costs from the previous year, not because we've spent additional money, just because of the structure and costs of running anything has increased. It's a big challenge. The city has many tax abated properties, and a tax abatement or pilot means that you are fixed at a certain payment for some period of time, right? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And when I came into office, I said, look, we're not going to go cold turkey on this sort of thing, because there's a lot of reasons why that could be more disruptive to what we're trying to do, but we're going to slowly wean the city off of this and a sense of entitlement, and we did that. So we haven't given a tax abatement in 4+ years at this point, and we've gotten the city away from that sentiment of every large development has a tax abatement. But there still are a lot of legacy tax abatements, long predating our administration, and some that we gave in those initial years when we were kind of moving away from giving out tax abatements. And what you know about the tax abatements is they don't participate in that added cost of government at all, because they have a fixed payment that they make regardless of what happens to taxes to the regular residents like you and I. And so something like garbage collection, which goes up exponentially every single contract, and is a big challenge for the city, those tax abatement buildings don't participate in it, which isn't fair. So by moving it over to the MUA, it was a structure to allow everybody to participate in a cost like garbage collection that every single resident uses. So it's about fairness. So your MUA bill went up for certain, but your tax bill is going down this year at a larger level than your MUA bill went up. And so the things that I ultimately control with the council, there is a net negative outlay of dollars from the residents. So I'm happy to make that argument every single day, right? Happy to do it, because I know that ultimately when a resident understands it, yes, their MUA bill might have gone up, but their tax bill, which is coming out, goes down by $1,000 on average. And they understand that everybody now is participating in the garbage collection. That is about fairness and the right thing to do.
I'm not sure all the people of Jersey City understand that or know of it, because you and I had some conversations on that.
Yeah, I don't think all of them know about it and all of them understand it. But the conversations that we've had with people, when we do explain it, they do understand what we're doing. And they understand why it is a political rhetoric type of thing that people are using during this time. Because when you explain it, the rational person is like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. I totally get it. We have been extremely responsible stewards of taxpayer money over the last 8 years. We've had flat taxes for 6 of the last 8 years. And I would argue that no municipality in the state of New Jersey could point to that track record. And we've also had tax credit rating upgrades almost every single year during that time period, meaning that independent agencies that also are not perfect, mind you, recognize the fact that we're headed in the right direction financially and we're making responsible decisions on that. So look, people could say what they want, which they will do, but I think that when we explain why and how we did something, it makes sense to the normal person.
Well, I'm not sure the city is explaining it to all the taxpayers now. Some people who are in the loop
Yeah.
or really civically minded, they know what's happening. They know there's going to be a decrease in the tax bill, which I don't believe has come out reflecting
Correct.
that
Yeah,
decrease
yeah.
yet.
But look, it's a challenge in our environment to get the word out at the level that I think that it should be out, just because of where we're situated in the media market, in the shadow of New York City, expensive media market, what mass media tends to cover, how people digest their news with regards to social media and not social media. Those are challenges. You guys all experience that day in, day out, right? So it's the same sort of thing for me.
Well, how
Not to
do you
belabor the
make up-
point on this, but
I'm sorry.
we've heard from Councilman Lavaro, Councilman Sullivan, and others that are running for office against your ticket
Exactly, key point there, but go ahead.
say that this is a backdoor tax and it should be called out as such, and the council should take action to alter or rescind it if possible. I mean, what's your take on that
Well,
perspective?
I mean, how is it a backdoor tax if somebody's taxes are going down by $1,000? So if the average house is having a $300 increase in their quarterly water and their MUA bill, but their taxes are going down by more than that over that same period of time, I don't understand how it's a tax increase. It's
So the
actually a
tax-
tax decrease. But the key point of what you said is that these are people running for office, right? So there's different types of people that we work with. There are the people that one would criticize that are more in line to agree with us. There are people that are healthy skeptics and ask questions and then come to a reasonable conclusion based on information. And then there's people that are going to be against anything for political reasons, right? And if you highlight somebody that's against anything for political reasons, then it's very, very hard to make a valid argument that they're going to come to a conclusion on and say that's a fair approach ultimately. How could you tell me that it's not fair to have a tax abated property participate in garbage collection? How is that not fair? Of course it's fair, right? Of course it's fair. And how is it a tax increase if your net taxes are going down by a larger amount? Of course it's not a tax increase. But look, this is what a campaign's about. This is why we're ready to have those conversations, and I feel comfortable about it.
So for the average Jersey City taxpayer, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember, the tax decrease is about $1,000, and then with this MUA water bill change, it's about $300. So it's a net of about $700 for the average taxpayer.
Correct, and they'll get that in their tax bill. I mean, look, I don't control all aspects of the tax bill. I don't control your county taxes. I don't control your Board of Education and school taxes, which we could talk about. I don't control, of course, federal taxes or state taxes. I control a little corner of the world with the city council, municipal taxes, right? And part of that are other fees associated with it, like your MUA, so to speak. But with what I'm responsible for and what we have control of, there's going to be a net decrease that's substantial.
Well, how are you doing that? One of the tools that allowed you to reduce taxes or keep them down and make them flat were the abatements initially, because the city was
Yeah.
getting a bigger kickback from, or
Yeah.
excuse the wrong term.
It's been hard, Al, because, you know, the abatements have near-term benefits,
DOE next.
but I think longer-term issues around some of the school funding and county funding.
Right.
But from a financial standpoint, the tax abatements have been really, really helpful. And we've had to restructure a lot of our budgets and our plans over the last 4 or 5 years in order to get to a place we are today. I think we have reasonable visibility, our team, that we're going to have some stability on taxes for the foreseeable future on how we're structured, barring anything crazy happening, barring us going backwards on COVID in a substantial way. But how we are situated today, I feel pretty comfortable on that.
Well, now you also have the argument going on in the city council about the schools.
Yeah.
And you and Mr. Young had put together a plan that basically got trashed.
Yeah.
how does this, what,
Basically,
what
yes.
happens now? I mean, how do you help the schools if, the payroll tax didn't turn out what it's supposed to?
Well, look, again, the school budget is approximately $800 million. The city budget is $600 million. The schools have more money than the city does. The city has been tremendously helpful to the schools over the last couple of years, even though the school has the ability to strike their own tax levy. So when somebody says, well, the city should be paying their fair share, I think that it's not the city that pays their fair share. It's ultimately what they're saying is the taxpayer should be paying their fair share, because it's not the city. The city is just a conduit on taxpayer dollars. So when the Board of Ed says that rhetoric, they should understand what they're basically saying is that Stephen Fulop or Al Sullivan or Pat O'Meara should be paying thousands of dollars more ultimately.
Well, Pat should, but
Well, yeah, Pat should not maybe, but so there is no mechanism where the city just writes a blank check to the Board of Education, especially when their budget is much, much larger than ours. So the Board of Education has the ability to do whatever they want with regards to taxes, to cut where they think it's appropriate or to expand where they think it's appropriate. The talking point of that the city owes us money is exactly that. It's a talking point. But when you understand how government is structured, right, you know that there is no way that the city just writes a blank check. And where does the city get the money from? Gets the money ultimately from the taxpayers. We're a conduit. Interesting thing is when you go to any of the Board of Education members and you say, look, I'm happy to write you a check, even if we were, right? And if the council was, show me where I should cut it. Where do you want me to cut those money from? Tell me. Do you want me to cut it from police? $10 million, $20 million? They say, no, 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 no. How about health and human services? You want me to cut that? No, 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 no. How about recreation and youth programming? You think we should trim around there? No, don't do that. So the question is where? What they're basically saying is just, raise taxes thousands upon that $1,000 on the residents. And what I've said to them is that the same residents that you're looking to protect, the same ones that you pretend or say or believe that you're advocating for, are the same ones that you're squeezing out by just increasing the taxes by thousands of dollars per year. That's kind of where we've been on that. We're willing to be helpful when there's a responsible project that we could clearly see, like we're spending $14+ million from the MUA on lead in the schools. Even though responsibility to the facilities is controlled by the Board of Education and the state of New Jersey, we view it as an impact to our residents, our kids, and ultimately our responsibility, because all the residents are our responsibility. So we're trying to solve those things. But some of the rhetoric around the school situation is exactly that, rhetoric. And I think that most people understand that, except for some noise on social media.
When you talk about the $1,000 approximately tax decrease you're giving this year, that is way offset by the increase from the school taxes. You're doing your due diligence to try to bring the taxes down, where the Jersey City Board of Education has raised it up, I think, at least $1,000 this year.
I don't know what the final number is for the Board of Education, but we don't control their taxes or their budget or anything. I mean, we're having conversations. I am with Franklin Walker, superintendent, and some of the other key players in the conversation on how we could set up a responsible path forward. Okay, so those are ongoing conversations that we're having, and I'm optimistic on that we'll get to a place that works for everybody. And I don't want to
you're the mayor. The buck is going to stop with you, and I'm going to tell you, 80% of the city looked at that tax bill and they see Mayor Fulop and his administration.
Well,
how can you confront the Board of Education when the average price to educate a kid in Jersey City is almost $19,000 a year?
Yeah.
In Toms River, that's about 70 miles away from here, and it's a fine city. I do a show on Toms River. It's $10,000 a year down there. Why is it almost twice as much as Toms River? Well, and it keeps going up every year. They're jacking the $200 million.
Those are questions that I've asked, and those are questions that I hope that the public asks as well. When we deliver the tax bill, we do our best to explain to residents at the same time, this is how your tax bill is broken out, right? And I think up till now, most residents understand it, but as the Board of Education increases taxes at the rate they've been increasing taxes over the next couple of years, or last couple of years and into the future, people are going to ask more and more questions and be more and more critical. And as they connect the dots, they're probably going to be more actionable on how they respond.
Now you're talking, now the council's talking about splitting the marijuana tax, the weed tax, with half of it going to the Board of Ed. no matter how much money you
Yep.
push at the Board of Ed, it just gets sucked up and they still
Yep.
need more.
Look,
Somewhere down the line, Mayor, and I know you don't control the Board of Education, it's an elected board.
Yeah.
You've got to sit down and say, listen, I got to stand up for the people of Jersey City.
My view has been that allocating $3 million out of an $800 million budget is not going to change the direction of the schools. That's lip service ultimately and feel-good rhetoric with regards to allocating cannabis money over to the schools. However, $3 million or $5 million and $6 million in social equity programming for those impacted by the war on drugs is going to have a meaningful impact for those impacted over time. And so I would, if you ask me where I would lean in this, I would lean that more money should go towards social equity programs along the lines of what the council president said and Councilwoman Ridley. But the council decided what the council decided, and I'm going to go along with that. Ultimately, we're going to try our best to be cooperative. But if you ask my personal opinion, I would prefer to see more of it going towards social equity programs.
So, Mayor, pre-pandemic, as you're well aware, the council approved a measure that would have put a referendum on the ballot where they would let the voters decide, should we go to an appointed board or should we stick with the elected board?
Yep.
You guys ended up pulling it because, of course, the pandemic. Is this something you think you might revisit next year or, upcoming years?
We haven't had any conversations about it since we reversed course on that. Look, right now, the superintendent and I are having really productive conversations around how we could work together. And the hope is that once we get to a place of kind of figuring out where there's opportunities for the city to be helpful and the Board of Education to make some changes that might be helpful as well, that we get to a place that we continue to work together. It's not on my radar screen right now doing anything on the appointed board. So the short answer is no.
And on a broader point, as Pat was talking about, so, I think it was almost $850 million budget for the Board of Ed this year. In the next 2 to 3 years, that number's probably going to be about $1 billion, which is, of course, astronomical. And they have their problems with the state. The funding's going to get cut about $100 million next year. So whether you want to blame the Board of Ed, the state, or the city, or a combination of the three, of course, there's no silver bullet, there's no magic wand. But what do you think would be the first big step forward that anybody could take, whether it's you, the state, or anyone else, towards righting the ship?
Well, look, I think there are a lot of options, and we've spoken to the head of the JCEA, who's been great and really receptive to conversations, and the superintendent, and some of the board members about direction and some options, right? And we do want to work together on this. There are some things that we've proposed along the way that are head scratchers on why the board wouldn't have moved forward on them. Give you an example. We said you could minimize the pain for residents with a tax increase by selling the Claremont building or the building on Bright Street. It's something that Councilman Yun and I discussed with them. We said to the Board of Education, we can't write you a blank check, but we could acquire this building from you that you're currently using and then lease it back to you for $1 a year for whatever you want, 20 years, okay? And what we can say then is that we're not writing a blank check, we're acquiring an asset long-term for the residents of Jersey City, that long after I'm the mayor, somebody will make a decision on what to do with. In the near term, we're gonna get the Board of Education some dollars, and they could stay in the building ultimately because they're paying virtually nothing. So from our standpoint, when we proposed this was a win-win-win-win, right? Everybody's benefiting. Taxpayers, the Board of Education, the residents, the City Hall, everybody. They said no. We said, why? No real explanation. They said no. We gave a litany of options similar to that, right? They have the old PS3 on Bright Street. It's very, very valuable real estate that isn't filled to capacity. We said, you should do one of two things. You should either fill it with students, as there's demand downtown, or sell the property, right? And be responsible with your assets on that front. It hasn't happened, right? But there are things that you can do as you fight it out in court, even if somebody says those are one-time options, which a critic might say, you say that's fine, right? But in the situation that the Board of Education is in today, that they're seeing such massive reductions in funding, right? It's hand-to-hand combat year to year, ultimately. So if you can bridge the gap and ease the pain on a taxpayer between 2021 and 2022, or 2022 and 2023, that's meaningful while the court case on funding works its way through the judicial process. And ultimately, the hope in a perfect scenario is that you've minimized the situation for the taxpayers in 22 and 23 or 21, and at the same time, the courts say, well, that reduction in funding was unconstitutional and we're going to reverse it. And so you've minimized the hurt, and at the same time, you've bridged the gap in order to recoup the funding that's necessary. But you have to be strategic about that sort of thing. So we're talking to them about a litany of options, right? And the city wants to be helpful on these things, but it's really about kind of coming together to find a solution and them willing to do some things other than just hurting taxpayers.
And Al mentioned the payroll tax earlier. Now, you and I spoke a couple months ago about going to the legislature and ask them to close that loophole since it's so hard for the city to collect the payroll tax from certain businesses. I'm just wondering if there's any update from the legislature on the Assembly or Senate side.
They've given us some additional information to go after some of the delinquent payers, and we've been doing that aggressively from the city side. We hired a team of people that have been doing that, and it's been helpful. But the best solution is still that the state collects the taxes. They've told us that they legally can't do it. And we scratch our head why, but they have access to all of the employment information that the city doesn't. When you think about, and I've said this at the Board of Education meeting, when you think about the structure in the payroll tax, initially OLS, the Office of Legislative Services in Trenton, said that it should benefit city taxpayers close to $100 million. You saw numbers of 80 million, $110 million, and it hasn't been anywhere near there because in many ways it's a voluntary situation to pay that tax. Example, if somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, right, the city knows that you're obligated to pay $8,000 that you didn't pay. We could put a lien on your property for $8,000. Then we go and sell the lien in a sale, and somebody's buying that lien because they know that the person owes $8,000. In the situation of this, we don't know what the person owes ultimately, and nobody would buy something that they don't know what they're entitled to because you don't know what it's worth. So if so-and-so business is supposed to say that they have 40 employees and they lie and say 25 employees, we don't have a clear way without Trenton of knowing whether there's 40 or 42 or 30. We don't know. So it's impossible to put a lien, it's impossible to sell the lien, and ultimately that's the biggest barrier to collecting 100% on this. So that's where the state needs to come in, and that's where we need the help on this. We proposed a option for people that were delinquent in paying to say, hey, you don't owe interest, settle up with us with what you have and we'll move forward. And the Board of Education said no. Look, whatever you call it, an amnesty program, a forgiveness program, it's common practice. IRS, state of New Jersey, they do it all the time. All the time, these sort of programs, right? Because you're getting money on the books that you would never have had before. There was no benefit for the city. We could have done it, but we said, you know what? The legal thing and the right thing to do is ask the Board of Education. Of course, they said no, because maybe it was a proposal from the city. But when you look at it, why would you say no? It would have been found money. If you end up with $5 extra, it's $5 more than you had before, which is a benefit.
Does this mean you're going to back some candidates for the Board of Ed?
Am I going back to what?
Are you going to back candidates for the Board of Ed?
No, I'm not. I have no ambition to get involved in the Board of Education. I mean, look, we're at kind of a critical time right here with the school funding situation, and I need to have a relationship with whoever's there to try and figure this out, the school funding situation. And I don't want to get into a situation where somebody is saying, well, you backed the other candidate and I'm a little bit bruised about that, so I don't want to work with you. I'm going to try my best to work with the 9 people that are there and figure it out.
You know, we're throwing money at the Board of Ed, whether it's payroll tax, weed tax, cake sale, whatever it is. Are you comfortable with the $850 million budget being legit?
Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know enough about where they spend their dollars specifically in order to criticize it or to commend it. They go through a process like we do where they have budget hearings. It goes to, I think, a county superintendent to sign off on it and the state. So there is a process about that. With regards to what their priorities are, you need to have a conversation with them about it.
Well, they keep coming to the city, and we
I
want
think-
money from the
look,
city.
there's-
Did they open the books to you and say,
No.
this is where the money's going, this is where the payroll is going?
Their budget is online, right, is what they would say, so there's access to it. But when we've proposed things that I think are reasonable and simple, Claremont, good example, Bright Street, good example, some other things that the city has done, buyouts, simple, right, and non-controversial, right, they've been reluctant. So it's been hard.
Well, does anybody go through those numbers that they say this is our budget? Is there any, like, forensic accounting on this?
Look, the public elects Board of Education members, and those Board of Education members have an awesome responsibility it's an $800+ million budget, Pat. So we respect the public on who they choose, and we're trying to work with everybody on it. What can I tell you?
And actually, speaking of elections, we haven't even talked about what's going on for ahead of November yet.
Oh, is there an election?
Oh, yeah.
I do.
So with that, of course, you have a declared challenger in Lewis Spears, and
Yep.
from him and from candidates that support him, it doesn't look like a formal slate, but we've heard from at least, I'd say 3 or 4 candidates that have said this administration basically has a council that is just a bunch of yes men and women. They do whatever the mayor wants. And we've heard from Mr. Spears, who says that this mayor's neglected the South Side and has helped the wealthy homeowners, property owners downtown. So, I mean, that's painting with a broad brush. That's a very quick synopsis.
Yeah.
But what do you think of this campaign so far?
Look, I'm not going to get into Lewis other than saying I'm pretty comfortable that as residents learn more about him, they're going to understand what's fact and fiction. Okay? Stop there. With regards to the overall campaign, right, I think the council deserves a lot of credit for moving the city forward, and they disagree on plenty of things. I just touched on a fact with marijuana and cannabis. I disagree with direction that they've chosen, but this is what they decided ultimately. There's countless examples of that. Critics, again, during the campaign season are going to say that somebody's in line with the mayor or their rubber stamp, and it's campaign season, it's rhetoric. I think that the question is going to be, do people feel that the city is ultimately moving in the right direction? And I think that the majority of residents in Jersey City are going to say yes about that. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
I mean, you say you disagree with the council. Are you saying you don't want them to give Board of Ed money?
I don't think, I've said it before, I don't think that we should ever be giving a blank check to anybody, right?
Okay.
I don't think it's responsible. And when you think about an $800+ million budget, $3 million isn't going to change that, but the social equity component is.
So
right?
you would steer all the money to social
I
equity?
I would lean in that direction. But again, as I said earlier, I'll defer to what the council wants on this.
You and Solomon agree on one point. No, he wanted to give it to the schools, right?
I think he wanted to give it to
Yeah,
the schools.
absolutely.
He wanted to give it to the schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you compare this campaign to your other two? And actually, even your ticket, your running mate, to from 2013, 2017, and today. Because it's like comparing Eli Manning's Super Bowl team, the 2007 and the 2011. You go back and you look at them.
I think I've grown and I'm better at the job than I was in 2013 or 2014.
Oh, you were terrible then. Yes, I agree.
I feel like we've done a lot of what we promised, and we have some more things to tie up. And so that's why I'm running. And I think we have a very strong track record now to point to, stronger than most mayors and councils in the country that are running urban areas. And I think that when we communicate that, the public will recognize that as well. But it's definitely a challenging environment, right? I don't take anything for granted. We are going to use all the resources we have because we recognize that it's important to communicate with the community on the things that you've done you're proud of and let them decide ultimately. Like I said earlier, I think overall people will say the city's moving in the right direction and aggressively in the right direction. And when they get into the voting booth, I think that that's ultimately the decision that they're going to make.
Well, what do you see as the biggest issue of this campaign?
Well,
then?
look, I think that what's the issue of the campaign, or the issue that's facing us over the next 4 years that I want to prioritize? Look, I want to prioritize some more social service issues, and I really want to focus on kind of the affordable housing conversation. I know that we've put the inclusionary zoning ordinance in place, which, mind you, when you look back, I'm comfortable in saying in 4 years it will be the best inclusionary zoning ordinance in the state of New Jersey, because it's not one that was focused on just feel-good sort of language that won't accomplish anything, which is what most of them are in the state of New Jersey. It's based on something that, how do we actually accomplish building affordable housing? And so you've already seen some of the redevelopment plans amended based on this, and I feel that we're going to be able to move the needle on some of this stuff. Bayfront, big affordability component, but those are going to be like a big priority for me over the next couple of years. And then continuing on the public safety front. And then of course, you know, in the near term, COVID and the pandemic. We're by far not out of the woods on that. And so we're going to continue, again, HHS and focusing on that.
So based on that, it sounds like you're feeling pretty confident in the fair share housing case with the inclusionary zoning ordinance.
I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like our team did things properly, and more importantly than doing things properly legally, I think that we have something that's going to really be a positive model in getting something done. Look, two things on that. You know, first is, let's talk about the framework that it came from, right? We'll just focus on the framework that it came from. It came from a model in Newark, right? And Newark's fair share housing, since it came forward 3-4 years ago when it was first implemented, it enacted zero projects that have actually built affordable 20% housing per the ordinance without massive subsidies from the state and massive abatements or pilots from the city, which we're not doing ultimately. So to say that here's a framework that exists is just not true. It's a framework of language that might feel good, but it ultimately didn't accomplish what they wanted it to accomplish. We're trying to get to a place that it actually moves forward in a positive way. It's the most important thing to us.
And a fun pure politics question, I think. So there was a report in the New Jersey Globe approximately a month ago where the Senate President Steve Sweeney and George Norcross came to Jersey City. They met with a bunch of members of the legislature, and based on the report, it said that they were looking for support in the 2025 gubernatorial, and they said that you were going to be a non-starter basically, so why would you even bother talking to this guy? We should build a relationship. What's your thought on that report from that meeting?
We're all entitled to opinions, you know, and I don't put much stock in anything other than what's happening here in Jersey City in the near term. So, you know, I'm happy that they came to Jersey City to have a conversation with our legislators. All conversations are good ones, but that's it for me.
No consideration of 2025 at this time.
No, 2025 is an eternity away. I got still a lot of stuff to do here, and this job I do believe this job is the best job in New Jersey, period. It has afforded me the ability, which I probably didn't appreciate fully at the time when I was thinking of running for governor ultimately, of really meaningful and tangible change that I wanted to accomplish and seeing that through. Also having the ability to forge closer relationships with people individually, and of course being around for my family and my kids, which is like, to me, the most important thing, and the thing that I really, really relish every single day. And so, you know, the world works in kind of mysterious ways, and the way things worked out for me couldn't have been better. And I'm in a really, really good place, and just thankful for the opportunity to have the job that I do.
Tell me about your ticket this year. Because I asked you about comparing the ticket from the previous year, 13, 17 to 2021. Tell me about this ticket, which is pretty much a veteran ticket.
Well, it's a veteran ticket in regards to people that we've worked with. I mean, Youssef is relatively new still, so the councilman for Ward D. And it's a different relationship with the councilman for Ward C, who's beat us twice. He's running with us now. And there's plenty of issues that we disagree on, plenty, with Councilman Boggiano. But, you know, we were very close to Councilman Yun. I do feel that Councilman Yun, Councilman Boggiano, and our ticket at the time would have come together. And when Councilman Yun passed away, we still built the relationship with Councilman Boggiano, despite the fact that we didn't agree with him on everything.
Well, you're doing a lot for his part of the city.
Well, I think that, yeah, but there are a lot of things that we don't agree with, of course. You know, he's had some issues with some development things that we disagree with, bike lanes and street safety, which he and I disagree on. We're having an issue right now regarding one of the homeless drop-in centers that he and I are not necessarily on the same
Yes,
page,
he
which is
raised
okay.
that,
It's a
yes.
healthy dialogue, right? And when we appreciate that. I think the one thing about Councilman Boggiano that you can't argue is that he's always coming from a place where his heart is for the people and for the city, and it couldn't be more sincere how much he loves Jersey City, right? It's a basement filled with memorabilia of Jersey City that's historical. The guy really loves Jersey City, and although we disagree, I appreciate that fact about him.
So we know Ward E is going to be a fun race, if
Yeah.
I could coin the term. But is there any other race that you have your eye on that you think might be interesting?
Look, I think Ward E will be the most competitive race in the city. I think Jake has done a very, very good job as prosecutor, and I think that's a tough race nevertheless. I like Jake's odds, and as the campaign gets moving, I think that Jake is going to increasingly become stronger and stronger, and you're already seeing that. Over the last month and a half, he's becoming more and more comfortable with regards to the candidate component of what he's doing on the political side, and I feel that he's ultimately going to be a real formidable candidate. He's done a good job on the quality of life side on his governmental responsibilities, and that is very easy for him, right? He's fit for that job, but his interests are ultimately also to be on the legislative side, and that's where he wants to go, and we're supportive of that because he's done a terrific job.
I mean, Solomon is trying to, basically garner the progressive vote.
Yeah.
How do you think HUDnet is able to draw out of that, and how do you do that?
I think there is a constituency within that Jake will be able to penetrate. I think Jake has done a very, very good job on public safety, on law enforcement, on quality of life issues, okay? And I think that when it comes to a voter for Jake, it's going to be somebody who's mindful of, I want a representative that is very, very focused on the issues that pertain to me in making my life better from a quality life standpoint every single day. So less involved maybe in national issues or international issues, right? More involved in local issues, because ultimately that's what really impacts people, right? Is there a trash can on the corner? How are we dealing with public safety and law enforcement? How are we dealing with kind of fire staffing issues? Those sort of things.
Okay.
So the primary, Councilman Sullivan, had a pretty good day in the sense that I think there's about 20 seats in Ward E and he won about 14. You think that has any implication for November?
I don't, but I think that Councilman Solomon definitely has a base of support. I think anybody who tells you that he doesn't have any support is being disingenuous. But that said, a primary, a Democratic primary in the environment that we were in the last Democratic primary is very different than, let's say, a November election, right? And it's a different constituency of who votes, how they vote, when they vote. All of those things are different, right? And so we'll see. We'll see. I mean, look, Jake has the ability to chart his own course with how hard he works and focuses on Ward E, and James has the ability to chart his own course based on how much he works and focuses on Ward E, ultimately. I think that, if they both really stay focused there, it's going to continue to be a good race, and we'll see how it plays out.
What do you look at, and how do you see Ward F?
Look, I think Jermaine has done a terrific job, okay? And again, Jermaine and I don't agree on everything, which is healthy, right? Liberty State Park is a good example of that, right? Some of the development projects he and I disagree on. It's all healthy. So when people say, hey, he's a rubber stamp or this person's a rubber stamp, I can point to a litany of important subjects where we disagree on things. However, if you look at what Jermaine has been able to garner for his constituency in Ward F, it is second to none in the entire city with regards to investment and real tangible dollars. $200 million in the municipal complex, Berry Lane Park, we're about to finish Bethune Park, disproportionate amount of kind of public safety initiatives and social service initiatives. He's building a community center. He's focused right now on a training program for different types of skills, carpentry, workshops, those sort of things. He's got a lot of really, really strong things to run on, and I feel pretty good that once he gets into communicating that, Jermaine will be fine.
I believe this is the last one from me, but there was a statement from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The spokeswoman said something to the effect that Jersey City would be losing $11.6 million, or have to give back, I should say, $11.6 million because they did not allocate it to affordable housing within the timeline that they gave the city. So what exactly happened there from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I think that we're appealing some of those decisions. I mean, the Jersey Journal wrote an article highlighting Terry DeHare's project, I believe, was the one that they highlighted for $1.6 million. That project started in 2010, as the Jersey Journal highlighted, predating me as the mayor. And when we came in, there was a litany of issues regarding paperwork issues and compliance, right? And so you get into a position there with how do you proceed? Do you proceed down the road of something that you know is non-compliant, or do you try and correct it and there may be an expense? And that's ultimately what we decided to do. So the broader number we're certainly appealing, but there's individual projects where I think we made the responsible decision based on commitments that were made prior to us, but there was a cost to that, to unwind some of those commitments. And that Terry DeHare project is a good example of that.
I'm good.
You have, now, the infrastructure agreement, if it ever happens in the Congress, how does that impact? Does it improve the chances of projects like the light rail being extended and other things? What else in Jersey City do you think will be impacted?
We had a meeting this morning with the leadership at NJCU, and this is one of the things we discussed. But what I said at the time, and I'll say it now, is that it would be, again, foolish or maybe disingenuous for us to make commitments around those dollars, because if it passes Congress in a month or 2 months or 3 months, you're looking at several months after that till we get our allocation of dollars, meaning that they'll tell us, hey, Jersey City's entitled to $50 million or $60 million. Once we get that number, there's another duration of time, could be weeks, could be months, where they say, here's what you're allowed to use these dollars for ultimately, right? So they're certainly not going to say, here's a blank check for what you can want to do in Jersey City. So what I expect will happen is a year from now, we're going to be working with the community on how to spend those dollars, right? I would think that the best thing that we can do with it, if it was kind of an open-ended situation, is focusing on how to subsidize affordable housing, but we'll see based on the parameters.
Great.
All right?
All right, I'll let you wrap it up.
Just saying thank you to you guys and thank you to everybody. This was a really good conversation, really good opportunity to communicate with people about some of the things that are going on. Looking forward to doing it again.
Well, hopefully we can do something like this every 4 to 6 weeks.
Be great.
Take an hour out of your schedule
Be great.
and tell the people of Jersey City what's going on.
Perfect. Okay.
All right, let me wrap it up. All right, you just watched a meeting with the mayor. Mayor Stephen Fulop is our guest. I want to thank Al Sullivan from Tapped Into, John Heinis from Hudson County View, and also want to thank myself for dreaming this idea up. You be good, you be safe. I'll talk to you during the week. Good night.
Yep. How you doing, Mayor?
Thanks myself.